So in this session, we are going to be reflecting on the historical roots of environmental challenges and activism. So this panel discussion aims to take you on a journey through history to understand how human actions have shaped the environment and led to the current climate crisis. So it's a shame that you didn't kind of get to do your little visualization exercise, but I think we're going to have a bit of a history lesson anyway, so we should be all good. And by examining these key milestones and policy decision and societal shifts, we will unravel the evolution of environmental awareness and the roots of today's challenges. And the discussion will highlight lessons from the past that can guide us in the present and future climate actions. So we're looking back in order to look forward. Cool. And if you're just joining us now, my name is Emma Sinclair. I'm the COO Director and Climate Action Lead of Impact Hub Waikato, which is the organisation that runs Climathon Waikato. So I will sit here. Kia ora, guys.
Kia ora.
So good to have you here. Yeah. So it's my honour to introduce this panel to you guys now. I don't know if I'm blocking anything, but you can see their real faces here, so I don't know if we need to, if we need to look at that.
Looks good on camera. It's good.
Does
on
it look
camera.
good?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Is there a filter on there that kind of makes us look like 10 years ago now? Not that you guys need it.
Usually cam mode.
Beautiful stuff. So starting the introductions with Adam Purcell. So Adam is a local restoration ecologist and the managing director and co-founder of Titoki, is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, I should have checked that before. Titoki Land Care, a company that specializes in ecological restoration and biodiversity management. So very cool. And then we've got Dr. Kiri Wallace sitting there in the middle. I was going to check, do you prefer to be called Dr. Kiri or Dr. Wallace or just Kiri?
I'll answer to any of them, usually just Kiri.
We can make up another name for you. So Kiri is fueled by her passion for urban restoration ecology and rekindling the human-nature connection. So very much kind of on track with what we already talked about. She co-leads the Bioheritage Eco Index for Aotearoa program and conducts research for people, cities and nature. She's currently a research fellow at Te Whare Whananga Waikato, the University of Waikato, in the Environmental Research Institute. She has dual Kiwi American heritage and lives in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, where she enjoys walks in the Nahere with her partner and 1-year-old son. And she always has a good book on the go. Again, very relatable person, I hope you'll find. And here we've got our beautiful Climathon participant, Shepherd. So he is one of the people who actually went through that long and grueling 18-hour day that I told you about. Shepherd hails from Murupara and spent his formative years in Turangi. He's an adept woodsman by trade, having also garnered experience in diverse fields such as hotel, restaurant, orchard and construction industry. Beyond his professional pursuits, Shepherd's deeply engaged in various community initiatives. He dedicates his time and passion as a catalyst for action. So again, very, very relatable person. He contributes to organisations like the Advisory Regional Committee, Environment, ACRE, and the Poverty Action Waikato, POR, and Lake Rotorua, Restore. Roa.
Yeah, Rotorua.
Oh, Rotorua, sorry, okay, go. And so for over a decade, he's been an ardent volunteer channeling his energy into community gardens, gully restoration, and community efforts. So that's very cool. So yeah, we're going to spend some time having a great kind of just natural discussion about the past of the ecosystem and climate action in this country and globally. We invite questions from you guys if you have any. So we've got Laura and Andrew, they'll be just kind of walking around with little post-it notes. So if anyone has a question, it has to fit on a post-it note. Please write, like nice and tidy. So they'll just just put your hand up if you want a post-it note. As Andrew was like, oh, I'll go and get the post-it notes. Yeah, if you have a question or anything for the panel, we'll do those at the end if we have time. But we do have a lot of questions, and I'm sure you guys have a lot to talk about. So we're super excited to have you guys here. So shall we delve in?
Yeah.
Cool. I thought we'd start with you, Adam.
Sure.
If you could give us a little history lesson of Aotearoa New Zealand and its natural world. So, what did it look like? I think Kylie's already alluded to it, but in terms of ecosystem communities, and what's happened and how has it evolved?
Sure. Yeah. So historically, pre-human arrival, New Zealand was covered in about 80% forest. So essentially, alpine areas where trees couldn't grow, or if there was a recent volcanic eruption, or it was infertile soil, too wet. Those are really the only places we didn't have forest. And then following the arrival of Māori and then subsequently Europeans, essentially we now have around 24% forest cover. Through the Waikato, it was largely kikatea swamp forests through the basins, and they really started to get cleared around sort of the late 1800s when some wealthy Englishmen got hold of land for very cheap and decided to fell it and drain it and turn it into farming land. Over the other side of Morons away, I think Māori had already started to clear a lot of that for essentially burning it and turning it into sort of a bracken. I think a lot of they used to. She probably knows better, but eat the roots. That sort of there's a process of turning
Cultivating it.
and turning it into sort of like a bread-like food, I believe. So that's what historically that's how things have been, and unfortunately a lot of it's been cleared, particularly in the lowland areas. We still have a lot of forest up on the hillsides and things, but in lowlands where it's suitable for farming, it's pretty much all been cleared. A lot of areas around here, it's sort of less than 3% native cover remaining, which is pretty sad, and a lot of those areas that are remaining are pretty highly degraded. It might just be sort of kikatea trees that may even be grazed underneath, or otherwise it might just have some Tradescantia like weeds really. There are some really nice spots still, but largely it's pretty poor quality stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Shepherd, do you have anything to add to that, or could you share with us your understanding?
That plant he's talking about, they cleared it. It was a food source. That's what it was. That's the reason why they did that. It wasn't that the settlers had actually structured the land, it was really structured before they even got here, because they'd seen all the clearing going on. I was made for food and space, and the actual root of that altar, it was broken. It's a medicinal. It was broken as a little sponge bread. We tried it. It's not really flavourful. Just remember that flavour that day was their flavour. Today's about cake run with the nuts, right? So it's a whole different change.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Kiri, if we shift the lens to sort of more like environmental action and community action, in climate action, what lessons do you think we can learn from historical instances of successful environmental activism?
I might preface this by saying that I felt like quite honored to be included in the panel at all, because I'm not a climate scientist either. I know we talked about that. It's like, but you know what? I care, just like everyone else here. So I'm interested in being part of this with what I can contribute from biodiversity or from activism knowledge. I would say that one of the big things that we can learn from the past and we should remember is that kind of having that political awareness can be quite important. I think there's a lot of different ways we can think about taking action, and so that doesn't have to be it, but that can really, if we look back through the decades and longer even, that can be a way that we can help to change things for the better for the environment. It may not be your space to do that, and that's fine. We each have our different strengths, so we should play to those. But that was one that popped to mind immediately. And it doesn't have to be big central politics. In fact, apparently, local politics are more important and where we can really generate a lot of change. Like the Nature in the City strategy, that was totally a local thing. like Kiri Wallace did that on our own, and it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the thing that I wanted to remind us of.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, beautiful. And it's nice that you touch on that as well, because all of our panelists here today are, here in the capacity of experts in their own lived experience, and just bringing a really nuanced lens to the climate conversation, which I think is really important. And I think that you guys definitely bring a lot to that. So we'll stay with you, Kiri, because we know that you're really passionate about restoring people's connection with nature, and there's if I understand correctly, there's a really kind of like strong well-being lens on that for you, and helping people kind of benefit from the connection with nature. So my question to you then is, in terms of historical evidence, if we're kind of continuing to gaze in the rear vision mirror, what can you see in terms of evidence for the connection between humans and nature, and that well-being connection to a healthy environment?
Well, I guess when we look into the past and we observe lifestyles of people all around the world through the ages, there was a lot more going on outside. I mean, we evolved outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are part of nature. That is our home, that is our origin, no matter what culture or ethnicity that we claim today. So we know that also, there are lots of issues in the past with health and well-being in some ways, but generally a lot of the mental health issues that happen today tend to be, they can be stemming from this disconnection with nature. So I want to try to remember, like in the past, remind us of in the past, that wasn't always the case because people's lifestyles were different. So this kind of connects, I think, a lot with what a lot of us know already, why a lot of us are here probably, what Kylie shared as well, but that deciding consciously, purposefully to prioritize time in nature and encourage others to be in nature is actually taking care of ourselves in a way. So that's like in a mental way, but there's actually now interesting evidence coming in the present, so I won't talk about it too much because I'm supposed to talk about the past, but there's lots of interesting mechanisms even about how the microbes in our natural environments affect our microbiomes hugely. And so the microbiomes that we have in our bodies affect our mental well-being, our physical well-being, and even sometimes influence our decision making. Kind of crazy stuff like that. So it's just kind of all things we're measuring now that we kind of already knew in our gut, pun intended, that like from the past people have spent a lot of time outside, and that's been really good for us.
Totally, and I think it's interesting what you say, like some of this science is coming out now, like in the present, but the mechanisms were always there, right? And I think it's, intuitively perhaps we always knew that being in nature is where we belonged. And maybe Kylie, you're right, maybe we should have had this outside. Maybe next year we'll host this outside.
We need to talk, maybe I need to go and study, right, and just throw in the microbiomes and all that stuff, and even what's in our soil,
Yeah,
that's what gets
that's a big
released.
part of it.
It is so fascinating,
a whole
right?
Another probably talk, but amazing. It's so interesting.
Absolutely, and I think I have a background in nutrition, so I'm just only starting to understand now, kind of gut microbiome and the connection with well-being and health, and we're sort of learning about that, right?
Yeah.
But I'm always I have this nerdy thing where I'm out in the garden, or if my kids are climbing a tree, or when we're in the bush, I'm always visualizing all these happy little bacteria, and we're just in this symbiosis. But as you say, even before the science was there, the mechanism was there, and we knew intuitively, deeper within ourselves, that we belong in nature, under the stars, hugging a tree. And I think, whenever someone is not in a great space, there's nothing, there's nothing quite like finding any kind of connection with nature. I think we're really privileged to have access to such beautiful nature here in the Waikato. I have a friend who lives in, kind of central Bangkok, and she was having a tough time, and I'm just go fondle a pot plant or something, whatever you can do, just to kind of, rub a leaf on your face or something. Any kind of connection with nature is so meaningful. And Shepherd, I'd love to put this question to you as well, from a Masaranga Maori perspective, and what have you observed in terms of, over generations, or in your lifetime, our connection with nature, and how has that shifted, do you think?
I've worked in all environments. I think I first started up in the forestry. So you do 20 minutes, you wait all day. All right? You're not making money if you stop. that was taught into me. But on some of these journeys, in some of the areas we were up on the Maunga or out on the flats, you can actually see climate change happening. You can actually see rain coming, you know, and within 2 minutes it's right over you. So you can see it coming. From the sense-wise, to ears, to sight-wise, that's how you train yourself when you're up in these areas. You can talk to anyone that's even a hiker, probably say the same story. When you visualize out there, you're looking at the beauty. Well, for me, I'm looking at what's actually coming, right? So I'm just going to share this Waikato. My glasses, I can see it. E whakate muri, te haere whakanua. I walk backwards into the future with my eyes fixed on the past. So what they're saying here is, if I wanted to hear this kōrero, which I'm allowed to do now because I'm in a kaumātua state now, being asked, I was told to come and talk to you. I'm going to talk to that old fellow over there. You go, you are the old fellow. They call you over there and sent me over to you. So they're coming to ask for information. Right? You reflect in the right way that it connects them because they are a part of your iwi or a part of your whānau. It's all a maximum capacity that we're looking into the future. This is how Māori say they're looking to the future. They don't worry about the present, but they also look back into the past. So if you're seeking information, always go back to the past before you go into the future, because the present day is why you're asking that question right now. So that's the kaupapa of that kōrero. So historically, just a few years ago, for myself, so I've been at Hillcrest Stadium for 10 years, which has now just become a hub for schools that I created, how the networks. And I think about 4 years ago, it was the first time ever, and I've been there 10 years, that we had to water our plants in the middle of winter. It was one of the driest spells for a long time. So see, we witnessed this because we're there. Like, it took anybody else there as well. Where's the information? Where's the research? So you have to be here to feel it. I could write that on a document and tell you that, but you're just going to say, well, he's all, you know, it's not preference. It's straight from observation, okay? So historical passes, yeah. Well, we came in and cleared a lot of land, and not knowing that our climate was changing. One speaker I will use is, and I've got that book here for reference if you need to see it. And back in those days, they used kites, right? Giant kites. Now they found evidence of rocks with anchor hooks on them, all right? And you could tell that it was never for boats, because in this area it was really rocky. You couldn't park boats in that area, right? What they did was they built massive kites that would flow 200 meters into the air, and the tōhunga will sit there, probably hours, maybe a couple of days, just reading the shift of this particular kite. And he could read and foresee at least a week of what's coming. Right? Now, during this clearing of the land, there was also some ancient art that was found in Murupara, the caves there. And there was the designs of birds all flying over the wall. And they couldn't work it out. It took a couple of years to work it out. But they worked it out. And what this kōrero was telling them was, this is the first time in years that we've never had birds in their migration stopping through this area, right? So in the islands, they say when there's time to change, all the birds will be flying over. So, all right, it's time to do this. It's time to do that. But they're running late. What's going on? Right? We all know what's going on, right? They're getting caught in fires, getting there, the wild winds. So that's that change. Is today we're sort of in that mix of, you know, where to from here. But the historical overview that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think that's so cool as well. Like, just, you know, having someone sit, you know, with a kite, kind of observing the changes. Like, it's very, very different to like checking an app on your phone, right? Like, it's just a completely different connection with the natural world. So yeah, thank you for that. It's beautiful, beautiful kōrero. And Adam, from your perspective, can you share an example from history that kind of illustrates how our understanding of the environment has evolved over time?
Yeah, so, I mean, our understanding evolves in different ways, right? Like there's this sort of traditional knowledge, which has been carried through, but also scientific, Western science research that's, learning new things and also reconfirming older bits of, things that we already knew, but now it's confirmed with science. But also, there's science has its limitations too, and as sort of Shepherd sort of alluded to, you can see things that are happening out there when you do a piece of, you do a study, you're not controlling all the different factors, or if it's in a lab, you are controlling all the different factors, but you're not actually seeing what's happening out in the real world. So yeah, it's a combination of both really, sort of natural observations and scientific research is the best way to sort of help us understand how things are changing. But yeah, in terms of examples of what we've learned, we know a whole lot now. I mean, compared to what we didn't in the past around sort of just monitoring carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere and where that carbon dioxide goes, or even just general greenhouse gases. It's getting absorbed into the water. That's changing the chemistry of the oceans. That's leading to coral reefs bleaching and things. So we've learned so much over the last thousands of years, but also the last 150 years. I actually kind of personally think science has a lot to blame for our current issues, because if we hadn't learned so much, we probably wouldn't be doing so much damage
No, totally.
with all the technology that we've managed to develop and methods and processes that we've sort of come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something to add.
Yeah, it's like, say you say science and technology, they create something amazing, but it's wrecking something else over there. Like our biodiversity with our insects, we bring them here, they do the job, and all of a sudden they do something else. We bring in a special weed to do its job, it spreads out, and all of a sudden it's somewhere else where you don't want it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was getting at. Sort of,
Yeah.
we create these things and we think we're very clever, but we don't really understand the unforeseen consequences of them. So.
Yeah, that's going to be my follow-up to you, Adam, as well. Like in terms of how important is that knowledge, and how well does that serve us? So.
Yeah, it's tricky because I mean these tools that we're creating are they're incredible tools a lot of the time, and it's just we don't understand what the potential impacts of them are, and we live in a world where people need to make money, and so these new technologies need to get used, and there's driving forces behind them being implemented, and a lot of people pushing for them when we don't understand them, and so it's conflicting agendas essentially. We learn something new, we create something new, let's use it, but hang on a second, what's the impact's going to be? And we try and sort of say we'll take a conservative approach, but often, I think for the most part that doesn't really happen genuinely.
Because it's like shifting that balance of I guess ecosystems that exist and that are so fine-tuned already.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Can I add something?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I find this sort of topic so interesting because I'm like internally conflicted because I love technology. So, and I love learning new things, and I love like progress. But then this is such an important lesson that Adam and Shepherd have touched on, that we should learn from the past, that even if we make this cool new thing, we have to be careful how we use it, because it can be used for great things probably, or it can be used for really terrible things. And so that's something that we seem to forget, even like as a group as humans, that we need to remember how we wield things makes a big difference. So I don't know, it's just an interesting thing to be aware of. I think maybe to not be afraid of the unknown, but to remember the known as well, to find that balance between them.
Yeah, totally. And I think also just trusting that, coming back to kind of trusting that intuition that you spoke about earlier, just sort of, knowing where we came from perhaps can help us shape, our kind of activities and our attitude towards these different tools that we have, right? Yeah.
So in terms of climate change, we have to reach into ourselves, into our own climate change. before we start to look out. I've just come from cancer, so I had to stop a lot of things. I had to stop eating a lot of things. I had to change the environment around me. That type of climate change. I've had 4 seasons in one day just last weekend. I felt like shit. I felt like good. I felt appreciated. I felt wanted. So that type of climate change. Very important.
Yeah, tuning into like ourselves, our bodies, nature, our community. Yeah, tapping into all of that. And Kiri, so I know, so with your dual heritage, I wonder if we can kind of take a little bit of apply a lens of, you know, New Zealand versus USA, not like in a competitive way, but if you want to take it there, that's totally up to you. I'm just thinking, you know, in terms of, let me find my question here. So just in terms of cultures and just in your research, have you come across, you know, sort of innovative solutions, you know, and again, like with innovation not being all about kind of newness and creating new things, like, but from the past that might inspire us to tackling these current problems that we have, you know, and is there a difference in sort of how that's approached in New Zealand and in America in terms of learning from the past or indigenous knowledge perhaps?
Yeah, oh boy, wow. Yeah, pros and cons in different countries from lots of different angles. So I guess I could start with commenting on indigenous knowledge. I'm not indigenous, so that's my first disclaimer, but I have great respect for indigenous knowledge and do get very frustrated with Western science, which is, I've classically been trained as a Western scientist, but Western science, and it's the large majority of Western scientists, their stance when it comes to indigenous knowledge and also thinking that they've discovered new things. So it's many different lenses on maybe the same world, I guess you could say. But in the US, indigenous knowledge is generally not respected very much. You know, here maybe there could also be some improvements in that space, but I'm loving a lot of the renaissance of embracing indigenous knowledge and hopefully not appropriating it, so more embracing the holders of indigenous knowledge and lifting their mana, whereas in the States there's not as much of that happening. A lot of those cultures were really decimated, of some of the Native Americans. So, yeah, I won't go too much into that space. It's a very sad space. There's a lot of sad topics today, right? And we're here actually to be hopeful, I think, about learning from some of the sad stories, but moving forward into positive space instead. So I would say I love Aotearoa's, the space that Te Ao Māori still can hold here, and I hope that we will not let go of that, and we will encourage people like Shepherd and many people who are Māori to feel strengthened, supported, respected, to flourish in Mātauranga Māori, basically. I would say that in the US, a totally different switching now to kind of systems, cultures. In the US, there's a lot more top-down kind of regulatory pressure, a lot of like bureaucracy. You guys probably get that sense just from your travels to the US or watching movies or TV or whatever. Whereas in Aotearoa, I really love, there's more of the DIY thing, I think, that people are like, just gonna get on with it, and it can be a grassroots thing, and we're gonna do it. And it's really nice, and maybe it's because it's a smaller population or a smaller country, people feel maybe more empowered. That's great. You don't feel as like lost in the machine. And I think that's a real cultural boon to creating change, like helping with climate issues or biodiversity issues. So could go on for ages, right, about the differences between the cultures and learning from the past and present, but I'll just leave it there for us to think about.
Yeah, really interesting reflections, and it was definitely not kind of like a pick your favorite because that's not fair.
I live in this country, so that'll give you a hint to which one.
That's my favorite. Yes.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Living in New Zealand, being a Kiwi, and having travelled to the States, and a fair bit through through Europe, I think two positive things about the States and North America and New Zealand is at least we haven't had humans here for like tens of thousands of years. So we, and looking at, we've lost a lot of forest, but we've still got 24% of our country covered in forest, whereas you go to Europe, it's like there's nothing there really. But and you go to the States, and we did a road trip from like the Grand Canyon through to Los Angeles essentially, and you've got like the Grand Canyon, the Redwoods, Death Valley, and you see when we see you driving around, you see all these animals and stuff, whereas like in Europe you just don't get that. So at least like there's still a bunch to work with in both of those areas.
Yeah.
And in terms of sort of innovations that you're asking about, there's plenty of sort of new technologies that are coming out now that are like being pumped into the space of new innovations, at least for biodiversity management. Things like new traps and using drones for spreading seeds and controlling weeds. Even things like the bush to boardroom, like that's it's innovative. It's bringing people back to nature.
Yeah,
so there's plenty going on in space. Yeah.
And I think that's cool as well, like, just, kind of riffing on the drones and spreading seeds, I think in some ways it's like, okay, but we already, like, there were already mechanisms for doing that, right? Like the wind and all the things, but because we're now in this situation where, we have this technology available to us, so we can kind of combat some of the things that we don't have access to anymore, which is, perhaps the wind spreading it in the appropriate area because of deforestation and things like that. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting personally, like applying this kind of global lens. Like I grew up in Scandinavia, and I think it's a country that's, like from Sweden, and I think, we're often seen as kind of being, like super green and, quite advanced when it comes to sustainability. And I was trying to Google it just now, but I'm pretty sure it's like 4% of the surface area in Sweden that is like, kind of native forest, and we don't really, I think we believe that we live in this kind of, like natural world, and we have lots of kind of, green places and things, but it's not, it's not quite the same. And as you say, like it's been inhabited by humans for, so much longer than Aotearoa. And then kind of tapping into that indigenous wisdom as well. I don't think growing up that I ever learned anything about the Sami in Sweden. We have an indigenous population there, and every now and then we'll hear about horrible things that are happening on the news to them, but we don't learn about them. We don't ever get to kind of tap into that wisdom. So I think in that sense we're there's a long way to go here in Aotearoa, but I think we're lucky in a sense here that we get to tap into that. Cool. And because we're exploring the past, obviously we're looking kind of way back in the history of tens of thousands of years ago, but let's also explore another little blip that we had in our history recently with COVID-19. So I wonder if we could just riff on that for a little moment. We had unprecedented everything, including unprecedented use of the word unprecedented. I feel like that's never been so widely used before. So I just wonder if we start with you, Kiri, in terms of, what observations and lessons can we draw from this strange time in our history, recent history?
Oh boy, we can all share our stories, right? It was a big time for everyone, one way or another. But I remember thinking, good, I can just stay home or go for some walks, like to an extent. This was before I had a child to watch.
Do the garden?
Yeah, get to the garden. And I did have these thoughts that probably a lot of us had, where it's like, this could be a whole paradigm shift, right? We could stop doing all this flying. We could do a lot more being outside, being local, keeping a good social distance from your neighbors as you go on walks and waving to them. Like these things that I should do more often, speaking about myself, and that forced me to. And I was like, I can change, everyone can change, and then we'll all just stay changed. I don't know if that's what's happened. It seems like there's been a lot of going back to maybe some of the habits that I'd hoped we wouldn't go back to, including for me. I'd like to hear what Adam and Shepard have to say about it, but that's kind of where I'm going.
So during that I walk outside a shop and stand in a line, and I get there and I'm like, I must be number 75. They're all walking slowly to the door, and just like, man, this feels so weird, really, really weird. The other one was I spoke with Simon yesterday from Waikato. He was talking about when the planes and the cars stopped, there was an 8% increase in our air value, right? And that's how fast did that work? How fast was it? What, 2 months or something? How fast did the world change? The whole world changed in 2 months. Only to be reactivated 2 months later, or a year later. So,
That's the thing, right? And because I find this fascinating. I have a background in, like nutrition and behavioral psychology and kind of behavior change, and behavior change is so easy, right? Like you stop doing something, you start doing something, you do something differently, but it's the hardest thing for humans. But we changed our behaviors, we could, we had to. Like Adam, did you observe any behavior changes, or did anything stick? Or like...
Yeah. Well, the only thing that really stuck is that I think I work from home a lot more.
I do too.
And I think, a lot of people still do that. Otherwise, I don't think too much has changed. I remember thinking at the time, like, this is such an interesting social experiment. Like, the government's essentially just told us we can't do anything, we can't visit our family, and we've, like, agreed. It's like a couple of days of, like, notice, and okay, I won't go see my mum for the next 6 weeks or whatever. But at least, like, it shows you it shows you how much power the government has, essentially, and that, depending on how you want to look at it, if they decided that they really wanted to tackle climate change, like, it could happen. They could make the changes that need to be made to, like, fix this problem, really, like, within what people are allowed to do, and, getting the message across, like, around what needs to be done, and, what the problem is, and blah, blah, blah. But, I remember the time, though, thinking, like, hearing the messages of, like, this is the new way of life, and we're going to reconnect, everyone's, like, got a better work-life balance, but, and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, I doubt it.
There's so much hope, but also so much, I don't know, like, it's quite depressing in a way, like, as you say, like, if governments, if corporations really wanted to change and tackle climate change, they could. It's that attitude, right? Like, do we really want to,
But first we need to create a whole lot more fear.
Oh.
Right? That's the only reason everybody really
Yeah.
does it, because of the intense, immediate, imminent fear, the threat to themselves and their families. Climate change, I just feel, is up here.
Yeah, it's not. It's disconnected. Like, someone kicks you in the leg and it hurts immediately. Whereas you drive a car and turn a light bulb on, and apparently, like, the climate's changing. Like,
totally. And I think it's also, like, the people who can have the biggest impact and make the biggest change are not the people who are going to be most affected. So the people who are less privileged are, perhaps the ones living in fear, but they're not the ones who are impacting our climate the most, right?
Yeah.
I've been given the 5-minute warning a little while ago, so we're going to start to wrap things up, even though there's been a really cool conversation. I wonder if we ask you all just quickly to kind of wrap up with, what would be the main lesson from each of you guys from the past to inspire the present and the future relating to climate change? Would you like to go first, Kiri? You look like you have a thought brewing.
Yeah, I've had this thought going for a while, because I listened to this podcast the other day, and they were, I don't even remember what they're talking about. I think just leaving a legacy. So you can apply it to the legacy we leave in terms of climate change action, right? And they are saying it's kind of like, remember some of the cathedrals in Europe took hundreds of years to build. Like, there was no way if you were building that you were going to see the end of it. You were just part of the process. So as you think about the actions you take, it doesn't have to be, I'm building a cathedral, it's going to be done tomorrow. Like, it's okay to just put a brick down one day, put another brick down, and know you're part of the legacy. Lots of us are building together. And I like that because it takes the pressure off a little bit, right? Because we all feel that pressure. And you can think about it some days like, I'm just going to put brick after brick. And some days you can think about, I'm building a wall. And some days you might be like, I'm building a cathedral. Just depending on your, what you need to connect with that day and how much you're ready to deal with that day. So I think that's my parting. I'm building my cathedral. You guys are all building your cathedrals. We're building one together. It'll take time.
Building this future together. That was beautiful. Oh my gosh, very poignant. And Shepherd, you've got something in your kit?
Yeah, so collaboration, networking, we've got to keep that going. I guess I'm quite fortunate because I know a lot of people in the community. If I need something, go to bro. But most of my time is I'm sort of a part-time artist, right? So I've been weaving lately. And part of the weave and the actual art is that you have to have a story with it, all right? So I've been doing a bit of tanaku weaving, right? So, yeah, matariki, all right, so here's the story. Matariki, all right, the kite, climate change, all right? The ripple effect, all right? And when you drop one stone and it ripples out to someone else and they drop a stone and it ripples back that way, then it ripples this way, then you've got many ripples, all right? North, east, west, south. Papatuanuku and humankind, that white line there is the cycle of evolution. Tāne mahuta, right? Because I'm trees. I just do nature with trees. Yeah, Papatuanuku, the blood that runs through the people and the many streams of her veins, and Rangainui, right? And then this side. Okay, so this is my kairos pattern. As soon as I saw it, I loved it. I said, can you tell, because all your art here has to have a story to the pattern. So this pattern here talks about entwining, embracing, right? So from these, I could make a sentence, all right? So it's entwining my work, the community. It overlaps. Sometimes we have to pull it back to lay it down again. So we're going into our past, and now we're going into the future. So we lay it down, it's weaving in and out, over and out. Pull it back, lock it down, right? These bassoons here are the cycle of the air, the 4 elements, fire. It's all up, these 3 patterns here, all right? All these patterns here, pukenga, right? So this is my story. Right. Mum loves me, my sister loves me. Yeah, I haven't heard from teenagers ago. But they're looking at my kid and go, oh, I love you, bro. Awesome, bro. I said, no. It's something I'll take it with me on my full immersion journey next year. So, storytelling, really important. You know, and with rangatau, you can share them with that, plant trees with them. I'm quite lucky at Hillcrest Stadium, we've had schools come through that place. And I've got to thank Goika for being a part of that journey for the last 10 years. So it's been really, really awesome. I'm glad I went through the cancer, I beat it, I got back to my own natural climate, you know, and now I'm back. Yeah.
I feel like we should finish on that.
I was going to say, Adam, do you want to follow that? Like, with your, what's your lesson from the past? Take it to the future. Probably that. No, about it. Any pearls of wisdom from you two?
I'll just say, like, we've faced, humans have faced a lot of challenges in the past, and we're certainly capable of working through them and overcoming them. So, if we manage to get sort of governments and politicians and businesses and stuff on board, there's no limit to what we might be able to do. So.
Yeah, we know that when we want something, we will change it for sure. And I love that so much. Yeah, beautiful stuff. I'd like to wrap this panel up now. It's been really, I feel like we could have sat here and talked to you guys all day about the past. It's been a really beautiful narrative. I really love, the reflection on kind of how we're building a cathedral together, and sometimes we can't see the greater picture, but perhaps, if we all just sometimes focus on, we're doing a big thing, but sometimes all we can do is just like zoom in and think, I'm just going to try and lift this brick just a little bit today. And relating back to what Kylie was talking about, it's progress, it's not perfection. I think one thing that I'd like to reflect on that I've learned, in my short time in the kind of climate space, actively involved in a climate action movement, is that I think there is a narrative, especially when we talk about Indigenous knowledge or just the past, that everything is so crude and, so kind of basic. And that if we don't want to live in a world where we drive cars and, have cool apps on our phones, that we have to kind of go back to living in caves. And one thing that I have learned is that there is so much sophistication in the past and so much knowledge and wisdom and power.
Here is the map.
Oh, good. So much. Are you lost? Yeah, I'm a little bit lost, honestly. Yeah. Technology, right? Like, Siri, be quiet. This is the future. But then, inside it's like, no, we have our own compass. I'm not lost. It's fine. I mean, that's one of our main lessons. I think we underestimate that sophistication and we overestimate the sophistication of technology sometimes. On natural ecosystems, Papatūānuku, it's incredibly powerful. And I do think that we need a holistic approach and some balance. So yeah, I thank our panel so much for this time and for sharing your wisdom. I hope people enjoyed exploring the past with us.